A performance within a performance? What madness is this? And a curious one too, as the players on the stage begin with the captain's log, specifically one mentioning B'Elanna Torres taking the Delta Flyer to look for dilithium. They speak of a crash, though interpreted through nautical terms as might be appropriate for a non-spacefaring civilization. They also speak of Harry Kim legging it in an escape pod, which doesn't sound like him, but I guess B'Elanna is technically his superior and ordered it. The play ends with B'Elanna shipwrecked upon their shores, and that's all the guy who wrote this has for the audience. He looks important, so we'd best staple a name onto the face. The playwright will henceforth be known as Finster, suggested by Lieutenant Joshua Adams. The play's well received by the guy in the first row, who we're to presume is important from the fact that he has guards and everybody waits for his opinion. He likes it so much that he wants more. Another one in a week should do it, much to the concern of Finster. He cautiously agrees when he sees he has no choice, but at least manages to wangle a sizable piece of jewellery as payment. With only a week to write another story, he'd best go and seek inspiration. Handily, his inspiration is tied up in a crashed Delta Flyer, though isn't overjoyed at the situation. Hardly surprising, as the dickhead has been cutting her, though in his defence he thought he was treating her fever by removing the heat through bloodletting. She convinces him to grab a gizmo from the med kit and use it to heal her, the miracle of her disappearing cuts affirming Finster's belief that she's an Eternal, the term they use for their deities from the sounds of it. Eternals from the Voyager clan are new, though, and stories about them could be sufficiently profitable that he's willing to risk tying up a god. We learn that he made his recent play from the Delta Flyer's logs. Why the Delta Flyer would have a copy of Janeway's logs or allow unknown users to access them is another matter, but let's ignore that for now. We also learn that the crash happened 8 days ago, so I guess Finster has at least been feeding her. Probably better if we don't ask about toilet arrangements. B'Elanna wants to be cut free, and Finster wants details about the Voyager Eternals to make another play. They make a deal to trade one for the other, sort of, and B'Elanna immediately betrays him by grabbing a gun and frying a tree to scare him off. Never trust a deal with the gods. Even gods have limits to their power, literally, in the case of B'Elanna. The Delta Flyer runs out of juice while she's fiddling with it, bollocksing up any chance of calling Voyager. That also means she doesn't have a replicator, but Finster's back and he's brought food. Perhaps he thinks an offering will be better received than his last plan. It works, though probably through necessity, and she tells him about Voyager. At least she's filtering it through the lens of a lower tech level, explaining that Voyager is a ship sailing for the island of Earth after being blown off course by another Eternal called the Caretaker. The story dries up as soon as her appetite does, though B'Elanna's not done with Finster yet. She starts up a terminal with a spare battery, presumably one that isn't powerful enough to call Voyager, and brings up a picture of dilithium. It's what she was hunting for when she scanned this planet, so there's a fair chance they have some, and Finster recognises it. Unfortunately, the only place he knows of that has some is on the grounds of the rich prick at the play, and things would go badly if B'Elanna went and was caught, likely forced to use her eternal powers to fight the rich prick's enemies. Finster, on the other hand, would be merely executed, and with the promise of more story and a bit of implied threatening, he manages to go and grab some. The play is progressing, but not well. The Eternals on Voyager are just so hard to understand. Welcoming a Borg, sworn enemies of the Eternals? That's just silly. And a guy with no emotions? How does that even work? Progress on the Delta Flyer is similarly slow. Another setback means a need for a spare part. The Smiths of this area might be able to make it, but it won't be cheap. And if Finster's going into debt for her, he'll need more details. Even with those details, his players are still struggling to understand who these Voyager Eternals really are. As he's berating his Tuvok for crying about the loss of B'Elanna and Kim, another of the group runs in. It's Master Braytak from Stargate SG-1, and he comes bearing the news that the rich prick from earlier is going to war with a neighbour after being insulted. War on their planet is much the same as it is here, decisions made by the rich and powerful resulting in everybody else having a really shit time of things. But Finster thinks he might be able to do something about it, and visits B'Elanna. He doesn't want her to fight using her eternal powers, but instead seeks inspiration on a play that might change the rich prick's mind. And if avoiding war wasn't motivation enough, then learning that the war would bring scouts to where the Delta Flyer is crashed is sufficient to make her listen. So much so that he's convinced her to get involved with the writing personally, though her inclusion isn't taken well by all members of the cast. Voyager's hunting for B'Elanna and Kim, meaning the latter didn't make it back. Chakotay brings Janeway B'Elanna's distress call, picked up by a passing ship and forwarded to us. That was 10 days ago, which is apparently less time than Kim could have survived in an escape pod. I'd have expected emergency precautions for deep space vessels to last a touch longer than that, not least of which because Janeway wanted to stick 3 people into the exact same pod a few episodes ago, but what do I know? Anywho, the distress call says B'Elanna aimed for a planet to try and land. Janeway suggests Kim might have followed her to it, though if we're honest, the most important thing they'll have lost if he didn't is the escape pod. It probably even has more backstory than him. Back on the planet, the rehearsal is drawing to a close, the parts that are written, anyway. Finster thinks that displays of affection are the way to stop that rich prick from starting a war, or at least he says that's why he has half of the characters banging each other. But he still doesn't have an ending, and B'Elanna isn't convinced by what she saw either. He needs more inspiration, so B'Elanna tells him about the Borg. News that they have a queen interests him, and B'Elanna's assertion that Janeway would pursue peace with them if possible, even as their most deadly enemy, gives him the idea he needs. A confrontation where, faced with conflict, she instead chooses peace might be enough to convince the rich prick to do the same. B'Elanna likes it as well, and leaves him to finish writing. Conflict is a running theme, as she arrives back at the Delta Flyer to find one of the cast waiting for her there, the woman who left in a huff earlier when B'Elanna arrived at the play. She assumed Finster and B'Elanna were sneaking up here to do sexy time squirt with each other, but has now concluded that B'Elanna is an Eternal, perhaps even the one in the play, given how convenient the timing is. None of that matters to her though, only having Finster all to herself, which is why she threatens B'Elanna with exposing her to the rich prick if she comes to the performance tonight, before running off in tears. And if that wasn't bad enough, Kim's alive and has turned up at the Delta Flyer. He followed in the escape pod and landed a fair distance away, hiking over to her in the time since. He's also brought the transmitter from the escape pod, which just so happens to be exactly the part B'Elanna needs. If that feels like lazily contrived bullshit to you, then you can at least take comfort in knowing that I thought exactly the same thing. It's performance day, and Finster still hasn't got an ending. He's telling the others that they'll have to make do with what he's hastily cobbled together, but even he's not convinced and sends a runner with a message for B'Elanna. He'll have to hurry. Voyager's picked up their new signal and is on the way to collect them. The runner arrives at the Delta Flyer and, after a bit of shitting himself, hands over the note. Rather than say fuck it and leave like she should do, B'Elanna instead goes to help. Kim should probably speak up and stop her, but there was that time in the first season where he took a massive shit on the religion of an entire culture, so he's not really got a leg to stand on in an argument about the Prime Directive. The play's going well, and that rich prick might even be convinced by the exchange between Janeway and 7 of 9, who's also the Borg Queen, but the whole thing's going to fall on its arse if we don't get a decent ending. B'Elanna arrives, much to the anger of the woman who threatened her, and decides she wants to take part too. Onto the stage we go, where B'Elanna tells the audience that she'll be leaving soon. If anybody's confused by the change of cast, they're gracious enough to keep quiet. Finster's admirer isn't going to keep quiet though, and charges at the rich prick with claims that B'Elanna is a real Eternal. One of the other actors deftly turns it aside by making it a part of the play, and the rich prick is amused, while one of his guards removes the admirer. Some talk between Finster and B'Elanna ends with her teleporting away, so that's an entire culture we've just fucked, and we leave Finster delivering the moral of the story to the rich prick just in case he's too dense to have figured it out for himself as we fly away. Well, it's a solid enough, if unoriginal premise, and they do some interesting things with it, but the arse rather falls out of it at the end, doesn't it? B'Elanna's decision to involve herself feels arbitrary, and the end of the play doesn't make any real sense, instead relying on spectacle over story. Perhaps that's a veiled comment on Hollywood, but I suspect I'm just overthinking it. If we're being generous, we could say the end is an attempt at being meta, the episode itself having an unsatisfying conclusion after the play struggled to think of an ending. But that's a discussion we've had before, isn't it? In the Season 5 episode The Fight, I suggested that the disjointed nature of the narrative was meant to be representative of chaotic space. That's all well and good in theory, but in practice, it sucked balls. A turd's still a turd regardless of intent, and saying that it's clever isn't going to help with the smell. I'd best have a whine about the Prime Directive too while we're on the bad stuff. The initial Prime Directive fucky caused by the crash was accidental, so we'll give her a pass on that. Her continued contact with them and contamination of their culture with Federation backstory is entirely deliberate, though. You might think that doesn't matter, which I believe is a short-sighted conclusion in my opinion, but pulling it all out of her arse would have mattered even less. In such circumstances, Starfleet could take a page out of Elim Garag's book, Never Tell the Truth, When a Lie Will Do. Teleporting away at the end was just a flagrant breach, of course, and one with potentially disastrous consequences. If the rich prick ever starts to believe that Finster was harbouring a real Eternal and let her get away, he's going to have a very bad day indeed. It also won't go well for him if he's ever ordered to repeat the flashy disappearing trick in another play. The whole thing was ill-conceived by B'Elanna. Still, there's something to like in here too. Points to whoever thought of having scenes on Voyager be accompanied by a scene of the play examining the character or characters we see. Finster explaining to Play Tuvok why he'd internalise his grief after we see real Tuvok has been up for 10 days straight is a particularly good example of those parallel narratives working together. Is that enough to compensate for the flaws? Well, probably not, but at least it did something other than shoot the alien of the week, and for that alone, I'd argue it's worth your time. End of episode.
Right then, how do we injure multiple crew members so that Janeway will break Paris down for spare parts?
We're still doing that?
Yeah, why not? Feels like we're committed now, so let's have a go.
Okay then. What about food poisoning?
6 years with Neelix, mate. The crew have all built up an immunity.
How about something to do with the warp core?
Nah, those things either blow over or explode the entire ship. We need something serious enough to cause damage, but not so serious that people get instantly deaded.
Holy shit, I think I've got it. Smoke inhalation.
Smoke inhalation? How are we going to fill the ship with... Oh, leprechaun. Woof.